So growing up, I was a huge fan of the Ghostbusters, right? Every kid who grew up in the 80s adores that film and has a special place in their heart for it. It kind of came out of nowhere, considering it had a rather high budget and was a very risky venture for Columbia in 1984. When it came out, it was like the first big budget comedy that had extensive use of special effects. And really was a big risk for the studio and kind of everybody involved. And it was a massive success, critical success, made an absolute ton of money at the box office, and is a great film. I loved it growing up. And then the 1989 sequel came out, Ghostbusters 2. I'm actually pretty fond of that movie. I think Vigo the Carpathian is actually kind of an awesome villain, despite the fact that it's clearly not as funny as the first film, and a little bit of that magic has disappeared. It takes some big chances and some big risks. Some of them pay off, some of them don't, especially with the ending. But yeah, I like the sequel, and I think the original is an incredible movie. It's got some of my favorite scenes of all time in any movies. I think that the scene where Rick Moranis as Louis Tully introduces his friends to a party by like giving the entire room their financial information about like the husband's business being in receivership and like the mortgage rates on their house. I think it's this really funny ad lib scene that I think is one of the funniest scenes I've ever seen in a movie. So I adored the original. And then when the 2016 sequel came out, I was willing to give it a chance. You know, it was a reboot as opposed to being a sequel to the original film, and it sucked. Yeah, I was really disappointed. I didn't think it was very funny, and it was completely unnecessary. It didn't really pay homage to the original in the way like I felt it should, and it just kind of seemed like Paul Feig got these really funny actresses to come together without really anything resembling a script, and to just kind of make a bunch of stuff up on the spot and hope that they got enough on camera to make a functional film. And they did that, and I just didn't think it was very good. And all of the political issues, you know, with that aside, I just don't like the movie. And I don't think it's funny, and it was completely unnecessary. So I was pleasantly surprised to find out that the original director's son, Ivan Reitman's son Jason, was signed on to direct this movie and was basically just like creating the sequel to the original from the ground up, or to the original too, um, by himself. And I was super excited. I think that if there's anybody that's, first of all, understands the material. I mean, as the son of the director of the original films, he clearly like, grew up with these movies and has a special place in his heart for them. And he's a capable director. I think Juno's a really good movie, and I think Thank You for Smoking is one of the most underrated comedies ever made. If you haven't seen it, came out in 2005. Aaron Eckhart, Katie Holmes, Rob Lowe, J.K. Simmons. The movie's really funny. If you haven't seen it, it's great. And Reitman is one of those younger directors who clearly knows his way around the craft of filmmaking and is particularly good with actors of all ages. And so when I saw the marketing for this, and it was like a combination of, you know, younger actors and older actors, and probably at some point references to the original films with some of those actors returning, I was all on board, right? And it looked like it was going to hit all the right nostalgia buttons. So let's talk about Ghostbusters Afterlife. Thank you so much for checking out the review. Before we get started, click on that subscribe button and the notification bell. That way you know whenever I post a new piece of content. Also, side note, you can also find me now on Rumble, rumble.com/HometownZero, all spelled out. And all my videos will be posted day and date there every Wednesday at 9 a.m. So if you're on Rumble, please consider giving me a follow, and that would be fantastic. So let's talk about Ghostbusters Afterlife. Spoiler warning, I'm going to spoil basically lots of the movie, so if you want to go into this completely blind and not know what's going to happen, you should probably come back and watch this later. Okay, so basic overview of the film. It takes place way after the original Ghostbusters, and the movie kicks off with Harold Ramis's Egon Spangler basically biting the dust. It's all handled like in shadow with what's clearly a different actor. You can see like, you know, sides of his face and his graying hair. And I think it's handled really well. I think if you're gonna basically off a character and then pay tribute to him, this is kind of the way you do it. and it all works. Having that character be a central part of this movie, and make no mistake about it, his character, although he's only in the movie for a few scenes, is a huge part of the film and is really the beating heart of the movie. And that coupled with his daughter, Carrie Coon plays Callie Spangler, and she's like this single mom that lives in Chicago and is running low on money and gets evicted from her home, and has her father has passed away, and so she gets this land in the middle of Oklahoma with this beat up, dilapidated house that's probably worth nothing, and and the performances here from her and Paul Rudd as like the substitute teacher love interest, and all the adult performances are great, and really Reitman clearly understands how to direct actors. Kind of an important part of filmmaking, and something he really gets right here. All of these are really well developed characters. I think Coon's performance as Callie is fantastic. Again, Paul Rudd is great, and this is kind of the movie he's like born to play. I'm sorry, kind of the role he's born to play in films, and for what could easily be a throwaway side character, he's great. Everybody is great. Finn Wolfhard as Trevor, McKenna Grace as Phoebe, the two children, they're outstanding. And Reitman really deserves a lot of credit for getting that part of the movie right and giving all of these characters extremely well developed arcs. I think that's kind of a lost art these days when it comes to filmmaking, especially in what you could consider to be nostalgia bait, which this movie certainly is. It's playing off of our nostalgia from the 80s, but it gets all of that stuff really, really right. So I love that about it. The character arcs, the acting, the fleshed out stories, all of that is fantastic. This movie also has the appropriate reverence for the original films. It kind of has that like 80s Spielberg feel going on and like permeating the entire thing, but knows when and how much reverence to pay to the original films. And that's a credit to the script. Really, the movie has some issues, which I'll get into at the end of the review, but overall, the story is awesome. And if you're going to do a nostalgia play on something that we all love and care about, really, this is how you do it. I think the story here is fantastic. If you're going to do a sequel and set it way in the future, the relationships that are established between Callie and her father and her kids, all of this stuff is extraordinarily well done. Not perfect, but really well done. All the tribute stuff to Harold Ramis, which I kind of talked about in the beginning, it's great too. This is very much a movie that was made for him. We lost him several years ago, and the movie for an actor who's no longer with us, they were never going to recast him. The way that he's put into this film via a combination of the scene in the beginning and some CGI at the end, it's all great. All of that stuff simply works. The movie also looks fantastic. This is something I was pleasantly surprised about. The villain, which I'll get into a little bit later, looks awesome. They did a very good job. This is also a villain that we're extremely familiar with, and they did a great job with this character too. The visual effects that are here all look spectacular, which isn't really like Reitman's bag. This isn't the type of movie he normally directs. He does kind of quirky, offbeat romantic comedies and dramas, very dark humor on occasion, and yet this movie, he does such a good job with this type of film, and it's really exciting that he's kind of stretching some muscles we didn't really see before in terms of his ability to make films. So I like seeing directors step out and do something that is very different from what they're known for, and for him to kind of take up the mantle that his father started so many years ago in the 80s is really it's really special, and he does a great job with that. Like I said, it feels very Spielberg, very 80s, and I think the setting actually works in the film's favor too. This movie doesn't take place in New York. It's not big bustling city. It's the exact opposite. It's small town, middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, Midwest America, and it's great. it's really, really, really great because it acknowledges the events from the original film, yet while still giving us something that feels different and feels very new, and again pays appropriate tribute to the original. Now, there's a couple things I don't like. I think the villain here is a little bit undercooked. Basically, we get the exact same villain from the first movie. Gozer is back, and the way the character is done here looks incredible, but still feels very much like the original film. The issue I have is that we've seen this before, and it all feels very rushed at the end. And I think this movie doesn't really conclude it concludes in a way that's very satisfying from a wrapping everything up and again the nostalgia standpoint. But as like a movie ending, it fumbles it just a little bit. It ends a little bit too quickly. Everything with the villain is like wrapped up very neatly, and while I don't oppose that per se, there's just something that's a little bit off about it. It's a little too quick. It's a little too convenient. And in a script that really is so good and so original, I think dipping back in and going with Gozer, while isn't necessarily a bad thing, it just kind of feels a little bit on the lazy side. Especially when you have a movie that fleshes out everything else so well, the negatives do stand out. And really that's the only bad thing I have to say about the movie is it just kind of fumbles the ending a little bit with Gozer and it feels like it just happens a bit too quickly at the very end. So there's a couple great scenes during and after the credits that you should stick around for. But overall, I think Ghostbusters Afterlife is an absolute home run. If you haven't seen the original, what are you doing? Watch the original, watch Ghostbusters 2. And this movie is really special. There's a scene that I like that really kind of nails the entire movie for me. I like movies that have one scene that encapsulates everything, and this movie really has that. It's the scene where um, Phoebe calls and ends up speaking with Dan Aykroyd's character, and she calls and she's explaining like her relationship to Egon and Ray Stantz, Aykroyd's character says, you know, I hope I hope he rots in hell or something because they had some sort of falling out, and she tells him, well, he's dead. And Ray's reaction to me, he turns from like that gruff, like, oh, I still have this grudge to like, oh man, I'm so bummed. And the way all of that handled in that one scene, I think it speaks to Reitman's capability as both a writer and a director, and Aykroyd's, you know, love for the character and love for the franchise, and all of it kind of comes together in that one little exchange of dialogue for me. And so, yeah, I really love Ghostbusters Afterlife. It's now streaming on digital. I assume it's on Blu-ray too. If you've seen the original, if you have any reverence for Ghostbusters, yeah, this is a must-see. It really is. It's a very special movie that nails that 80s kind of vibe while still being set in the modern day, and is a really loving tribute to the original. So thanks so much for checking out the review. If you liked it, found it helpful, please consider subscribing. You can also like and share the video. That tells them it's worth promoting. Also, again, check me out on Rumble, rumble.com/HometownZero, and I'll see you next Wednesday, every Wednesday at 9 a.m.